Today on NewsWatch, the Pope is in Cuba. Hear his message for Fidel Castro and how Cubans feel about his historic visit. Plus, it's being called a second Holocaust. We'll show you the numbers that prove Christians are being wiped out from the Middle East. And
it's called Mali. That's not a scary sounding name. And also, you know, the high it gives you is warm and fuzzy. You want to dance, you want to laugh.
Molly sounds like the name of the girl next door. It is also the nickname for a dangerous new party drug. Hear one mother's warning about how it led to her daughter's death. Thanks so much for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead of his first visit to the United States, Pope Francis stopped first in Cuba. The Catholic leader is holding historic meetings with the nation's communist leaders. As Dale Hurd reports, observers hope it's a sign change is coming to Cuba.
During Mass in Havana's Revolution Plaza, Francis told Cubans to serve one another and not ideology, a subtle jab at communism. Later, he met with 89-year-old Fidel Castro, and he met with Fidel's brother and current president Raul Castro, who has joked that Pope Francis might make him consider returning to his Catholic roots. The Pope steered clear of politics in his homily, but has said in the past he hopes his visit to Cuba will lead to more freedom for the Church that has suffered through decades of communist repression. Cuba is the least Catholic country in Latin America. Most Cubans might call themselves Catholic, but less than 10% go to church. The papal visit happens at a time when some are hoping that change is coming to Cuba.
I think that this time is very important because of the fact that the United States and Cuba are opening doors to each other.
But while the Pope met with the Castro brothers, he has reportedly not met with Cuban dissidents, who were prevented from reaching the cathedral where a meeting was planned. And the Vatican stressed that no official meeting with dissidents has been planned. Not meeting with dissidents could alienate Cuba's devout Catholics, who have been oppressed by the Castro government. But they're used to it. Previous popes, including John Paul II, did not meet with Cuban dissidents either. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
The Obama administration is offering new details about the U.S. plan to take in many more refugees in the coming years. Secretary of State John Kerry says the U.S. needs to step up because of the Syrian crisis. He made the announcement during a visit to Germany.
We just came from a very moving meeting with a group of Syrian refugees, most of whom are very recently arrived in Germany, a few of whom came some time ago. I'm pleased to announce today that the United States will significantly increase our numbers for refugee resettlement in the course of this next year and the year after.
And Kerry says the U.S. will accept 85,000 refugees next year, and that number will rise to 100,000 in 2017. Those refugees come from all over the world, but the increase will mostly come from refugees from Syria. They will be screened by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and then resettled around America. The U.S. announcement comes as the humanitarian crisis in Europe escalates as thousands of families flee war and religious persecution in the Middle East. Christian relief agencies are doing what they can to help. Samaritan's Purse is working with churches to distribute 2,000 backpacks in Macedonia. The backpacks are filled with hygiene items like blankets, towels, diapers, granola bars, and candy. We spoke with the ministry's Dr. Natalie McDermott. She told us the outreach gives refugees an opportunity to experience the love of Jesus Christ.
Our goal with Samaritan's Purse is to be the hands and feet of Jesus. It's to meet people where they're at and bring them love in a practical way by meeting their needs, but also sharing love with them and sharing the gospel with them when that opportunity arises. And I think for them it's a reflection of who Jesus is when they see us meeting their needs and just loving them where they're at, irrelevant of who they are or where they've come from, just loving them where in the place that they are right now.
CBN's Operation Blessing is also on the ground in Europe, providing refugees in Hungary with food and plastic tarps to help them stay warm. A critical need as the cold and rainy weather season can cause widespread disease throughout the camps. After the Holocaust, the world said never again, but a group of religious freedom fighters say the world is indeed letting genocide happen once again. Paul Strand has this report on their call to fight back.
ISIS really is wiping out Christians in entire regions in the Middle East and Persian Gulf. Former Congressman Frank Wolf has seen the evidence himself.
In 2003, there were 1.5 million Christians in Iraq. Now the number is 300,000.
And ISIS declares it won't stop there. It'll bring this purging to the West.
America and its allies are tired of war after years of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that the genocidal killers of ISIS are going to give the civilized world a pass.
The head of Genocide Watch points out that Europe's pacifism has done nothing but get it a huge refugee crisis that probably won't end till ISIS is defeated.
NATO simply hasn't stepped up to the plate on this. The result? All of the refugees that are now flooding into Europe.
The chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom wants military action, but says the bigger, longer fight is to win hearts and minds away from the ideology of ISIS.
What is it that is attracting young people from Western countries, young people from relatively fortunate circumstances, to join a group that to most of us embodies pure evil?
She said countries need to see a better way.
We have to win the battle of ideas, and that, in our view at USERF, really does revolve around somehow embedding into these societies religious freedom as a valued principle.
They should be put on trial.
Professor Stanton advocates dragging ISIS before the International Criminal Court, as much to ruin its reputation and appeal as to actually prosecute it.
Take them down ideologically, because the reason why ISIS is attractive to young men and women around the world is the same reason communism was. It is a utopian, millennialist ideology.
The group in defense of Christians put this gathering together. Its Ninar Keiruz is positive ISIS can be defeated.
We believe that this can be stopped. It just needs action more than words.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the National Press Club.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his military advisors are in Moscow for a one-day meeting with Russia's president. Topping that meeting's agenda with President Vladimir Putin is Russia's military buildup in Syria. Israel is concerned that the terror group Hezbollah could use the Russian presence to transfer weapons to Lebanon. Jerusalem stressed that the Moscow meeting is between friends. 3 people were wounded when a gunman opened fire at a church in Alabama this weekend. A suspect has been arrested and charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. James Jr. Minter is accused of targeting his girlfriend, their baby, and a clergyman at the Oasis Tabernacle Church in East Selma.
Of course, it caused alarm throughout the community. Different churches, the congregation in different churches were talking about this situation. It's just shocking for a lot of people. But again, this is the world we live in now. It's sad that you can't just go and worship in church. You have to stay alert about who's around you now and that type of thing.
The victims were taken to hospitals for treatment and are in stable condition. Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson is under fire for saying he doesn't believe Islam is consistent with the U.S. Constitution and that he would not support putting a Muslim in charge of the nation.
It depends on what that faith is. If it's inconsistent with the values and principles of America, then of course it should matter. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
Following that statement, a controversial Muslim advocacy group is calling for lawmakers to repudiate Carson's comments. The Council on American-Islamic Relations says the Constitution expressly prohibits a religious test to qualify for elected office. They say Carson's comments show he is not qualified for the presidency because he cannot hold such views about a religion and still represent Americans of all faiths and backgrounds. Carson has been bumped to 3rd place by Carly Fiorina. A new CNN poll shows the GOP's female candidate is now in 2nd place in the Republican field. Her strong performance during the 2nd Republican debate gave her a 3% boost, bringing her support base up to 15% and helping her close the gap with Donald Trump, whose lead has shrunk to 24%. That's an 8% drop from earlier this month. Be sure to log on to CBNNews.com for the latest about the election 2016 races. There you will find exclusive interviews with some of the leading GOP candidates, including frontrunners Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina. Just click on the Politics tab. And still to come, here on CBN NewsWatch, breaking the chains of addiction. See how one church is helping young Korean men to overcome shame and be set free. Koreans living in the U.S. have some of the highest rates of substance abuse among all Asian groups. But a church in Los Angeles is lifting the veil on addiction and running a rehab on the grounds.
Nanum Christian Fellowship started in 1996. Pastor Young Johan started the church after a 20-year addiction to cocaine and prescription pills. He is now helping young Korean Americans break their addictions with a counseling program and free housing.
My name is Daniel. I'm 22 years old. I'm here because I was IVing methamphetamine and heroin for several years.
The church houses more than 50 addicts who are trying to beat their addiction to drugs.
What we've seen over the last 10, 15 years are predominantly alcohol abuse, really within the Korean community. We also see emerging now trends among the younger Koreans of methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin.
One hurdle to seeking treatment is shame. The cultural stigma of, quote, losing face leads drug users and family members to hide their addictions and to resist help.
Korean family, they only concern about education. They don't really concern about what? Personality, the character.
My dad just completely, he just completely disowned me pretty much. And my mom, she had no idea what to do until she found this place.
I knew he had a problem, but I can't say it because all the Korean mommies or daddies, they don't want to say it. They knew, but they can't.
This stigma often leads families to suffering in silence, but the church's programs are now a lifeline to the community.
I know he had a hard time, but in my life, it was the hardest. Yes, it was really hard, but it was worth it.
And now, In-hee Bak has no shame and stands beside her son in his fight against addiction.
And still to come, a lethal drug with a deceptive name that's sweeping college campuses. See how the drug known as Molly has been turning deadly. We've got the story coming up after this. Molly sounds like a harmless name for a drug, and it is getting more and more popular with high school and college students. They think it's just a simple party drug to take for a night out with their friends. But as Abigail Robertson shows us, that way of thinking could kill them.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Almost 2 years ago, Dee Dee Goldsmith awoke to a call no parent wants to receive. Her only daughter was dying after a fun night out went horribly wrong.
We were asleep, it was about 2 in the morning, and my cell rang. I picked it up, and one of her buddies said to me, I'm so sorry. And I said, what? You know what? Shelly's in an ambulance. She's on her way to the hospital. And we just had to stop all the time. I was sick the whole way. I knew she was gone.
19-year-old Shelly Goldsmith, a high school valedictorian and college honor scholar, had taken a drug known as MDMA, or Molly, on her way to a concert.
Shelly took MDMA and had a heat stroke while we were in the venue. And then she was taken to the hospital immediately.
Elise Eilerman was with Shelly the night she passed away.
And it wasn't really until the next day that we kind of understood the gravity of what was going on. And then we finally got the communication that she had passed away.
The same weekend Shelly died, Molly claimed the lives of 2 other young adults attending a music festival in New York. Molly, short for molecule, is a stimulant that takes users on a 6 to 8 hour euphoric high. It is thought to be the pure form of its parent drug ecstasy, but in reality, there is hardly anything pure about it. Recent studies showed that only 15% of drugs sold as Molly are really what they claim to be. A third sold under that name contains substances such as cocaine, bath salts, and baking soda, while more than half contain no MDMA at all. People think only the tainted Molly carries fatal consequences, but even the purest form can be lethal. So why is this drug so appealing to college kids around the country?
I think MDMA is like the best branded drug ever. It's called Molly. That's not a scary sounding name. And also, you know, the high it gives you is warm and fuzzy. You want to dance, you want to like laugh, you want to have an awesome time. And so I think it's just very misleading.
Molly, 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 Molly.
The media also with pop culture kind of, you know, holding this drug up as something awesome. And it's easy to hear those messages and not hear the tragic consequences that can also happen.
Dr. William Strudwick of Washington's Providence Hospital describes the effect of Molly on the system.
Well, Mollies are amphetamine-type drugs, and they're also hallucinogenics. So it speeds up everything. It speeds up their hearts. It increases their blood pressure. It gives them a sense of euphoria, a sense of warmth.
That euphoria can lead to dangerous side effects such as seizures, heart attacks, severe dehydration, and hyperthermia.
The tragedy is when it affects their bodies in ways that are untoward. Their heart rates get very, very fast. Their blood pressures get very, very fast. Sometimes they can have seizures, and that can lead to other problems.
Doctors ruled Shelley Goldsmith's cause of death as hyperthermia because her body temperature rose to fatal levels. Her autopsy revealed MDMA was the only substance in her system at the time of death, proving the drug's deadly potential. Since Shelley's death, many people close to her are raising awareness about the dangers of this so-called harmless drug. Her mom is urging lawmakers to amend the 2003 Rave Act, an act that was put in place to shut down underground raves where promoters encourage illicit drug use. The current law discourages organizers from using common sense safety measures to protect their patrons.
Now, safe setting standards are very basic things. It involves free water, cool down spaces or cool ambient temperature, appropriate numbers of medical personnel to deal with medical emergencies.
Dee Dee says venue operators won't implement these small safety measures because they fear it could be seen as encouraging drug use and subject them to criminal prosecution. She thinks that if Shelley had known more about Molly and its risks, she would be alive today. This would have been Shelley's senior year at the University of Virginia. After Shelley's death, Elise Eilerman helped start the Shooting Star Foundation to spread the word around the university community about the dangers of drug use. Each year on the anniversary of Shelley's death, they commemorate her life and share with students life-saving information that could help others.
We didn't really fully understand how grave the consequences of taking MDMA could be, and so for us, it was a huge change in perspective, and it happened because of a really tragic event.
Elise and the members of the Shooting Star Foundation have been working hard to encourage their peers to think twice about the risks of taking Molly in hopes of preventing other tragic deaths like Shelley Goldsmith's. Reporting from Charlottesville, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Abigail, thank you. Brave mom to share her story and hopes to make a difference in the lives of others. Stay with us. We've got more on coming up right here on CBN NewsWatch. North Carolina leaders are looking to honor Billy Graham with a statue in the nation's capital. The 96-year-old evangelist grew up in Charlotte and still does live in North Carolina. State senators unanimously approved a measure to request a congressional committee accept Graham's likeness as a state contribution to the Capitol. This move would replace a statue of a former politician with ties to white supremacy. The measure now heads to the governor's desk for approval. Well, it is time now for your Monday Motivation, and I'd like you to consider this. God has blessed you with unique abilities and talents. What can you do to give those gifts back to Him? In that answer, you will find where your skills have their greatest success. God wants them all, and there is a unique place in the kingdom for every single one of them. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We'll see you tomorrow.